Okay, very welcome all at the IS, both the online and the on-site participants. Yeah, I'm happy to introduce Tom, Idema, and Bergit, who will actually introduce this event. So thank you all for being here. And Tom and Bergit, yes, please go ahead.
Can I start off? That is, it's very strange to come to you online, actually. So I try my best. I'm sorry I can't be with you. My name is Bergit Arends, and I'm part of the project team. And I'm just going to say, together with Tom, a few introductory words before we go into the presentations of this afternoon. So yeah, I'm based in London. And you know, the rest of the researchers is in the Netherlands, and in fact that's the very idea of this project. So Narrating Just Sustainability in the City, the workshop today comes out of a workshop that was run by the British Academy in November 2020. Oh yeah, that's the first slide. Thank you. And it is there the aim of the workshop was just to match people, for people to find themselves with similar interests from the Netherlands and the UK, and to develop some ideas, research projects around the Anthropocene. So today, this is a sort of a part of this research project. Today, this workshop, we are really grateful to be hosted by the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of Amsterdam, and particularly to Esme, who's instigated the hosting of this workshop here. As you will see, we've gathered a number of collaborators along the way from this initial group, who's co-convening this workshop. So there's Tom, Idema, and there's Paul Behrens, environmental scientist, Tom being a literature historian, myself being a curator of contemporary art. And at the inception of this project, there was also Colin Sterling. And as a project team, we're really happy just to be here at the Institute of Advanced Studies through Esme's initiative. And I will talk a bit more about the other artists who are here as well. And I will talk a bit more about Esme then as well. So, but this is sort of, you know, these sort of the constructions between the two countries. And so actually, if you could have the next slide, please. So this workshop came out of this Sandpit event on the Anthropocene and the themes and narratives that this mega concept has generated. And we felt that, as I already mentioned, the disciplines that the Anthropocene can only but approach through a multidisciplinary knowledge. And at the beginning, we were particularly inspired by the geographer, yet another discipline, as it were, John Edgerman, who defines just sustainability, which is obviously a part of our project title, which you can read in many ways. But we went with this definition, just sustainability, as the need to ensure a better quality of life for all, now and into the future, in a just and equitable manner, whilst living within the limits of supporting ecosystems. So such ecosystems, as you know, we felt as illustrated also through this work here about Kanga, are inherently interconnected, non-linear and functioning, and more than human. They push us to focus on persistent feedback loops between social justice and environmental care. And then just sustainability in this sense is defined by interdependence, multivocality, equity, and network effects. So you can see that, you know, the Anthropocene is a big concept. We're sort of going with a particular narrative of the Anthropocene, particular focus on interconnections, but you'll see as we go along that there are many intersections with different narratives of the Anthropocene. So these phenomena are hard to capture and narrate, and yet it's vital that any response to the Anthropocene takes account of such dynamic, more than human systems rather than reinforcing human exceptionalism. So we came up with a few, you know, with a number of questions, and we'll come up with more questions today as well. But we thought at the beginning, at the outset of our research project, how do we encourage encounters? How do we enable participation? how to be just, sustainable, and in particular, as alluded to the title of the previous slide of Otrone Kanga's work, borrowed light of the work, of her work, of, you know, how much do we borrow from the future and what do we pass on to the generations that follow. So in order to explore that, we took a transdisciplinary approach. We really wanted just to shake the disciplinary boundaries around, and particularly starting off with the art and science, that how we can come together on this topic. And let's recall the beginnings of this. You know, we were sort of in the pandemic situation as well, but we also felt that we want to do something which goes beyond the study of existing phenomena, but also how can we contribute and provoke and work on the intersection between research and society. So we've invited a number of artists to join us as collaborators for this project. So, and today it's really nice. So we have got Esme, who's one of the contributing artists. We sort of selected artists we thought would respond well to the brief that we would set and the collaboration that we're trying to work out. So Esmee Geerken, one of the artists, Marit Mihklepp Edgars Rubenis from Den Haag, who also are around today and can be there in real life, and Temitayo Ogunbiyi from Lagos, who's joining us online today to contribute to the workshop and to engage with the questions that they brought up, which we'll talk about in a minute. So we really like to thank wholeheartedly the artists who engaged in this experiment. And for to give up their time just to explore things in this sort of in this narrow framework or wide framework, however you want to see it, of the brief that we set. So I think, Tom, if you want to take the next slide.
Sure, thanks, Bergit. In the interest of time, I'm going to go a bit quicker with this slide here. But I did want to share a little bit the process of how we came to the theme of this workshop. The organizers, came from different disciplinary directions, and there are lots of differences, but also commonalities. And one of those commonalities is the narrative and the role narrative plays in the sustainability transition. Now, we're all, I think, convinced that so far sustainability research as well as societal investments in sustainability have been very much focused on economic and technological innovation. So there's a call for more societal or cultural perspectives on what is sustainability and how to model it and how to engender it. And so the city is, of course, one strategic and very important site at which sustainability is generated. And narrative could play a very important role in rendering that idea of sustainability, which in and of itself is, of course, a scientific concept, more understandable, more provocative, more interesting for many people who are not versed in scientific language. And we think the narrative has a very important role to play, but we also think that art has a very important role to play in bringing back this kind of rather abstract concept of sustainability to experience, right? So what do we experience when we see or hear or feel sustainability or the lack of sustainability, right? How does that become meaningful to an individual or a group of people, a community of people? How could we conceive of sustainability in a non-anthropocentric way, that is, with recognizing the subjectivity or meaningfulness of the lives of non-human creatures? And all of those questions about narrative are also intricately related to scientific concepts. I think there are sort of two sides of the same coin. So notions of circularity and feedback, which are central to sustainability research, make their way into narrative somehow, some way, or fail to make their way into narrative. And this is something that we're very interested in. So many of the questions that we took from our disciplinary backgrounds are coming together in interesting ways, and I'm very curious to see how today will bring us further in that kind of exploration of how can we work together across the disciplines and also beyond the academia. So yeah, Bergit, did you want to add some more thoughts before we move on to the artists?
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, just briefly, just speaking a bit to the last slide. We came up with this idea of instructions. So that's kind of harking back to a sort of tradition of conceptual art from the 1970s, and I think it was very much in the understanding of we are in a climate crisis, we are in a biodiversity crisis. How can we, in this small project, how can we study something in particular? And we wanted to go towards, we know these phenomena, these things are happening. We know we need to take action. We know we need to change as a society. So how can it also already be reflected in the curatorial brief, as it were, to the artists? And how can we go from there? And how can the narrative of the technique of instruction already bring in other non-experts, or we're all experts in sustainability, or we're all part of the society. How can we bring in, how can we extend these questions? And so interestingly, as you will see in a minute, we sort of created this ideas around performative actions, and actually through these performative actions, they became connected to material culture, and together they sort of reveal entanglements between social and consumer behavior, global and local awareness, and issues of agriculture, consumption, supply chains, and biogeochemistry in a way. So this is sort of already quite broad topic, but that's how we sort of how we ended up, as you will see in a minute. And so so I'm really pleased, again, thanking you all artists for what you've done so far, and looking forward to hearing from you, and for the IS for hosting us, and for the participants actually just to come out and play with us today. So that's really nice.
Thanks. Shall we give the floor to the first artist who will share her project with us, coming from Lagos and Nigeria. So the floor is yours, Tayo.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Bergit, Tom, Paul, Esme. It's been great to work on this project, and I'm excited about where it's going to go. So my name is Temitayo Ogunbiyi, and I'm a visual artist based in Lagos, Nigeria. I've lived here for 11 years. And my practice really predominantly currently is examining botanical histories and how they become entangled with or in dialogue with human histories and the ways in which humans and information move. And so for the past 4 years, I've been developing a series of playgrounds that double as art sculptures. They're interactive and plastic-free, often incorporating plant matter here, the brown that you see around the bars, and as the canopy structure is actually jute. So I'm very interested in how plant matter can tell stories, help us to recall stories of exploitation, of colonization, and of everyday living. So these playgrounds are really at the center of my practice at the moment, but I'm also very interested in how botanical histories can be used to inform experiences with everyday people in contemporary Lagos, but also elsewhere. And so this project called Taste Memory was realized in November of last year. And in executing it, I collaborated with a chef who has been creating gluten-free pasta here in Lagos for several years. I believe she's the only producer of gluten-free pasta on the continent. And the idea behind our collaboration was to see how we could revisit childhood memories and invite others to do the same by using specific ingredients, mostly plant-based, that grow here in Lagos, And some of these include hibiscus flower, which is used to produce a drink called zobo locally, more popularly sorrel in the Caribbean. Then cassava, fonio, plantain, bambara. These are all flowers that are produced from local flowers in powdered flour, not flour that blooms. So these are all flowers that are quite popular here in Nigeria that are used in different ways across the country. And so this was kind of the beginning of when, no, I shouldn't say it was the beginning, but it was a reminder for me of how interested I am and how we can choose to package what we make and what we use, and also how we can choose to reuse packaging for various things as a form of sustainability. And so I think when I was invited to take part in this project subconsciously, that was the first sort of idea that came to mind as one that might help me to shape whatever activity I might come up with. And so here in Lagos, I mean, we have a number of different packaged food options as one would find anywhere in the world. And I think oftentimes because our recycling and refuse chains are not as tight as they may be in other cities, oftentimes I think people become increasingly wasteful on the one hand, but then they also become innovative, finding ways to reuse packaging. And so I wanted to invite others taking part in this project to do the same. I wanted to invite others to think about the food packaging that they choose to buy and ways in which that food packaging could be repurposed, almost as an unending challenge, if you will. I really wanted to see how far people could go in trying to think about how to reuse a can, for example, or a bottle. And at the same time, I wanted to also think about what it means to grow what we need and grow what we eat. And so part of the challenge was also, part of the activity also invited participants to think about different plants they could grow at home, and how these plants are then packaged in the supermarkets. It's almost an invitation to become less dependent on packaging entirely, especially if the packaging is not kind of packaging that one could easily reuse or repurpose or recycle. Then I also asked that the process be recorded step by step. I asked that people look at what they would need to grow various plants of their choice at home, where they could find these things, and how much they cost, as an invitation really to try and think more consciously about taking steps towards sustainability as not necessarily a collective effort, but one that begins at an individual level and perhaps can build out into more collective and cohesive means of thinking about sustainability. So the plant that I kept thinking about, which grows very well here in Lagos, but also across a number of different climates, was basil. We have a number of different varieties here that are used in traditional recipes, but the Italian variety is readily available locally on shelves. And there are certainly people who make it themselves and sell in relatively small batches. And so I thought to walk through the exercise, try to walk through the exercise with you, thinking about basil and thinking about a bottle of basil, something, a bottle that very well contain many other things. And then thinking about the different ways that we could repurpose that bottle. I have some ideas here, could hold pencils, pens, stationery. We used to plant new seedlings, plants, storing spices and leftovers, becoming a candle holder, a picture frame. And I think in brainstorming and thinking about these potential uses for a jar, it invited me to think about, question how people imagine the aesthetic of the reused object at home. How does that make people feel when they see objects that have been repurposed? And is there a way to, and if that feeling is a negative one, which I think would be the case in Lagos. I think sometimes reusing objects like bottles that one has purchased is not favorably looked upon. I think it can be associated with being in need or impoverished. And I began to think about what it would take to really change that narrative. You know, how do we encourage people to think differently about what it means to reuse an object and repurpose it, and to get excited about that rather than frown upon it. And so, yes, I ended up using mine for a flower vase. This was not my flower vase. I put birds of paradise and protea plant in mine. And it worked perfectly well. And looking at it, I was always, I found myself thinking about the other things I could do with it once the flowers died and moved on. So that's an overview of my practice and the activity that I pitched to the team. So I guess I'll hand off now. Are we taking questions now, Esme?
We will do that after all the presentations. So, yeah.
All right then. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so thank you very much, Theo, for your presentation. We'll now move to the next presentation by Marit Edgars. Looking forward to that. And then after the three presentations, we'll have time to share ideas. I encourage also those at home who are with us to share your ideas even during the presentation. You can scribble on via the chat in Zoom, and or you can keep your thoughts for the actual discussion. So please don't hesitate to share in any ways your ideas. But we'll first continue with the second presentation. There we are.
Just put it one up. First one is yes, sorry. Yes, hello everyone. It's I'm Marit, and there is Edgars. And we are very thankful to actually have participated in this beautiful project. And just yes,
My mom, so.
very good. So cool. Okay, we welcome all the moms.
Yes.
Yes, so I am an Estonian artist, and currently we are both based in The Hague. And for me, like, my artistic practice really goes around other than human, and also the relationships with other beings and who are not so human shaped. So I have been collaborating, or I kind of hope that it's more collaborations with trees and stones and microbes and also everyday objects. I don't know what they would say about this, but I call them collaborations. And most recently, I have been very much obsessed with stones and how to also what happens between the stone-human communication and connection. And yes, and also, let's say, the mediums are also very different. Like sometimes there are instruction cards, and it's more like an invitation for the audience to come to space where there is a situation that is set up. And sometimes it's also sound pieces, and sometimes it's also more visual, like more photography. But you will see. Because you let someone in.
Yeah, you just have to click on the screen.
Cool. Yeah, just click some.
Sorry, yeah.
And this is one of the most recent work, just to give you an idea, like a visual snippet of what I do. So it is an installation with stones and also with the projection of the same stones. And it happened in one other city, not in Amsterdam or The Hague, but it happened in Narva in Estonia, which is a border city, almost like at the Russian border there. And the stones also come from the river, which is an actual border of the two countries. And the stones are then in this space, and the sounds that are also played during this installation, they are also all to do with the stones and moving them around the same space. So this is this, and there is, how I got to know Bergit. I just wanted to share that there was Esmee in Ostendorf, and she was curating an exhibition called Changing Landscapes. And this is the work that I was presenting there, where I was also, just again to give a little bit of idea how I work, that I was walking around in this one particular place in The Hague, visiting 6 different spots over a course of 1 month, like every day. And as a kind of of course it became then kind of a ritual of taking notes, but also really photographing this one place. And then the resulting work was, all these photographs put in one, but this is just one of the 6 photographs. And how I'm also connected to instructions. This is also one of the works with the stones, and with how can human beings actually maybe experience a geologic time or something that is such a different body and also has such different life cycles, I would like to say, but also maybe it's a bit less alive than us, but maybe more slowly alive or something like that. And then I again invited the audience to take one of the 3 stones and try out some of these instructions together. Yes, so I forgot totally about you now, Edgars.
Yeah, just briefly. So, as Marit said, I'm Edgars Rubenis. I'm originally from Latvia, or Letland, as it's widely known here in the Netherlands. And I'm actually a musician. I'm a composer and guitarist in my own practice. And we have been, over the last couple of years, we have been working with Marit in collaborative settings a couple of times. And some of these things will pop up here in the presentation. I came to the Netherlands to do a study in The Hague, in the Institute of Sonology, and there during the course of a couple of years I did artistic research, you could say, on use of extended duration in music practices, on the ideas and motivations for that type of a practice, so to say, and that type of actualization of that type of experience in arts, and in particular music. But then also in my, apart from school stuff, I've been working in fields of experimental music and new music composition. Yes, and with Marit, we have had this very interesting link of working around, within and around the borders of, you could say, what is the daily lived environment, and re-seeing or opening in some ways the lived, and kind of scratching off the habit, maybe. So then an encounter with this, our own selves within our own environments could be experienced in a fresh way, I would say. Simple as that, but always, of course, a new way how to do it.
Yes. So and that's also why, because first we were having a talk with Bergit, and then I immediately thought, this is actually a great framework, like with the performative instructions, to actually work again with Edgars, because previously we had a good experience with making a sound installation together, with also kind of going with the duration, but again also going with the stones and trying to extend this yeah, like working with stones also as one of the performers somehow, but of course you maybe need to a little bit help them to move some moments faster, and some moments become slower yourself as well. So I think it was an interesting experience. And another, and this is part of this performance also, where we work together. And another work was again in a border area in Estonia, but now with the Latvian border. So there's a city that is halved, and we were having an intervention of 6 hours walking the border and also seeing like what things are halved by the border and maybe what not. And we had this also a sonic intervention of playing the border posts. Like, yeah, you can see this there, this funny thing in the whole grass. And they didn't, I mean, it was also sometimes very difficult to really see where is the actual border, and sometimes the swamp had also, maybe previously it was exactly on the border of the swamp, but then in one moment, of course, it's also nice to see that natural bodies and like bodies of water and swamp bodies and also trees, they don't really care about this border. So it was nice to see that, yeah, this is just happening, and this, yeah, what is Latvian swamp and what's Estonian swamp, I mean, it's not, yeah, you cannot really have these things. And then now going to the project, what we, or the piece of work we did here. Do you want to take over?
Well, so one of the initial suggestions or proposals from Bergit and Paul and Tom was that we would do work, try to make yeah, basically do work in Binghorst area, which is an industrial site in The Hague, to see how the ideas of circularity and of this just sustainability, let's say, manifest in that space, or how, what type of ideas we could generate in response to that life, how life manifests there. And yes, we did visit the place. We did our best to kind of find ways and find threads of how to engage there. But then in this process, we actually understood that our way how we could contribute maybe better, or how we would like to contribute to this to these ideas here was more through making not something really site specific there, but actually creating continuing with these instruction writings that Marit had already been using in her previous practice, which then could be used, let's say, in one period we thought that maybe you would, let's say, as an audience, you would receive
Sorry.
That we would work with instructions which you would receive in your very personal space and actually create, carry them out also there where you spend your daily life, so as to, again, to find the actual spots of your life where and see how these ideas of circularity and all these bigger, massive maybe thoughts play out in really, everyday practices.
Yeah, to bring them like really to your kind of coffee table, or to these places where you actually live and actually don't maybe experience an exhibition, let's say, but at the same time, your practices or the movements you make or the rituals that you have, they are sometimes also already enough. And in that sense, like sometimes just with a little instruction, it can just maybe, I mean, it's not also about the grand gesture or something, but it's really more this very subtle shift in attention that sometimes just really, oh, my cup actually like sounds really weird with the table, or like this, I don't know, there is, at least for me, this is maybe also how I work, that just I notice something that a stone rock is rocking and then it sounds so beautiful. So I'm like, okay, maybe we can somehow work with these bodies that resonate in different ways. And
yeah, well, and then just as a continuation of this thinking, we were during one of the talks with Paul, I think that was particularly, we kind of it pricked us, it pierced us that his topic of circularity, and of course in his science work he works really on the like that is, from my perspective and Marit's, I think also it's kind of unattainable on that type of a science field, but at the same time we were curious if we could just almost on the purely spoken level in terms of words, if we could just use the term circularity and bring it, take it as an object around which a playful and poetic material could be generated, if you could say so. And then that's how in writing we did do a couple sessions of creative writing, you could describe them like that, where there were to different degree of intensity we tried to play with these ideas of circularity, but also sometimes that really like simply in your face kind of things, not like in terms of economics or some kind of recycling and these big policies, but really of this stuff, you know. So yeah, and some of those things you will we will share them later, so you will have an experience too.
And maybe also just as a so it's called now observing fourfold. So we just had also just for us, like as a structure, it was nice to think about like, okay, let's think about four, or actually it just came out because of the instructions we were generating, that it could be this four different spheres, so that it starts with the body level, and then it extends outwards to the object, which is just maybe in your immediate exactly your coffee cup or your chair, but then going to the room or like the lived space, like a living room or maybe all the rooms that you have, and then going to the city, which is then out, like you go out of the door, and then what do you encounter there, and then just like basically, and some of them are also much more like maybe still for the mind. So I think it's also for me always that it's nice to do some kind of a physical action, and sometimes it's even really like it's very simple and even seems absurd, and why do you do it? But in the middle of doing it, it's like something really happens just in the connection with a material or another being, or even like, again, your glass, maybe you start to see it in a different way, but again, it's not so much about like trying to find the performance, but somehow to like tune your own attention somehow to something else, and that maybe that then gives also openness to these bigger topics, which are then or can be somehow addressed, or you also become more open, like something becomes so dear to you that you want to also take care of it, and through that the sustainability actually comes, and your own relationship with yourself as well. That your body is also a thing, and it needs love, and you know, like it's so I think that's it. And just also I think we really wanted to, you talked about all a little bit, but I also think that why this was now nice, that this cross exploring, or what does it mean, also like transdisciplinary, or sometimes all these words are so weird, but or overused also, but then in this case I really enjoyed our conversation with Bergit and Tom and Paul, like also just in this perspective that these are all very relevant topics, also they're resonating through the art world, but then somehow when you talk also with people from other fields, I don't know, somehow you see that there is these different voices, and how this maybe fields can also meet, and where can they meet, and it's of course a little bit tricky as well, but I think that's where the juice is also. It has to be also, it is challenging, but I think I at least was also so hopeful not to hear that, okay, there is this, I mean, there's actual science about sustainability, and there's actual like numbers, and I understood what it means, and I was like, okay, it's not so difficult actually, but it's also, you need to have this conversation with an actual person. I mean, if I read it, I'm a little bit like, okay. I mean, it's just overwhelming somehow because it's not my language, or and enjoyed really much also the process of writing and this like rewriting, and then also because I was so obsessed with the pink horse, like I really felt like the site has to become a partner. But then and we went to the cemetery and we really thought about circularity of human bodies. I don't know, it just became really crazy. But then I also felt like it was time to let go of also something that is so fixed, and it was much more natural to go from this, I guess also because of the pandemic, and also that everybody was at home. Like we also thought we don't know how long it goes on. So in that sense, like that, let's give an experience to everybody anywhere, not focus on a like specific spot, but it could be in a rural space, it can be in between, it can be in the train, or so that is more like open, not so much connected to the Hague, or yes, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marit and Edgars. And now we'll move to the third and final artist presentation by Esmee Geerken, who also happens to be our host today. So I think it's admirable. So we'll just wait for her to open her presentation, and in the meanwhile, maybe you can make some notes, write down some brilliant questions for during our discussion, which will take place after this last presentation. There we are.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, Bergit and Tom, and also Colin. Super nice that you are here, and Paul, that you are there somewhere. And thank you all for being here today. Oh, I have to say. Okay. Yeah, I'll just keep the part about my own practice really short. I'm happy that actually, yeah, my practice is really a hybrid between earth sciences and art. And in my projects lately, I'm mainly thinking and working with building and looking how building is a way to interact with the environment at different scales. So at the micro scale, which you see here, inspired by chemistry and biology, but also at the scale of cities. So I'm very happy there is some building going on in this building today. So you may have heard some noises. So well, that's all part of the practice. Yeah, if you want to know more about this project, you can find it on my website. But I have a lot to share about this project because I thought it was really inspiring to reflect on the artist brief. And so I got this really nice brief that invited me to reflect upon certain themes and connect them basically, and then design these instructions for performative actions. And I was asked to reflect upon circular economy, but also teleconnections and ecology and also power. And therefore I thought, let's, of course, as an earth scientist, I know about teleconnections in the climate system, and I know a bit about ecology, but I thought it would be interesting to learn more about circular economy. So I started to look up more about the origins of this Ouroboros figure, which is this snake that bites its own tail, which is the symbol for circular economy. And I was browsing a bit on Wikipedia, and then at some point, entering the rabbit hole, I stumbled upon Cleopatra the alchemist and her chrysopoeia. And chrysopoeia is the making of gold. And here in the screen, you see the chrysopoeia of Cleopatra the alchemist, also a very early Ouroboros drawing. And I became super intrigued by these drawings. And this really inspired me for this project, to also look into my own alchemical practice, but also, with the help also of Bonnie, who's here today, a master student, we're looking also into her work. And it's really interesting to me that she was this woman alchemist really before at the onset of the development of Western alchemy, but also really inspired by Eastern philosophies and Eastern wisdom. And her work, actually more than really making gold out of base metals, really revolved around the concepts of conception and birth and the transformation of life. So I thought this was very interesting for this project particularly, but also just for my own practice as some kind of modern alchemist, throwing things together in the lab and trying to create lifelike shapes out of these primordial soups. So looking more into this idea of circular economy, I suddenly was a bit puzzled because I realized, and others have realized this too, of course, much earlier on. There's always been debates about what does the oikos mean, that the house that's part of ecology and economy. And I was puzzled and wondered, when did these two notions start to diverge from each other? When was ecology, which is the study of the house, not really informing economy anymore, which is the housekeeping? Because to me, I would think, as a scientist or artist or both, first you study something and then you use this knowledge to do the housekeeping. So I wondered, what if bankers become earth keepers? What if bankers are managing the flows of energy and materials for all? And yeah, I was reflecting a bit on what is our house and what is good housekeeping, and what good housekeeping, what could that mean? And I once again realized how for us, the surface dwellers, the sun is our ultimate energy source. And once again, I realized how our entire urban ecology, or urban economy and ecology actually, has been built upon photosynthesis. So chocolate, meat, carrots, but also fossil fuels, gas, and even wind and water energy, they're all ultimately deriving their energy from the sun. However, the living state most likely has its origins here, in the womb of the deep ocean. And the first life most likely drew its energy from geothermal heat. So the heat that is escaping from the core of the earth and touches upon the water and eventually upon the air. And I wondered, how can we reconnect to this primary source of energy, to this actually entirely other ecosystem with another type of metabolism? How can we reconnect to the warmth within the core of the earth? But also, how can we bathe in this abundant sunlight without the need to fight over it through wars and power play? So I once again realized how both of these fires, the earthly fire and also the sun, how these fires transform earthly matter, rock, water, air, into these complex patterns that emerge and decay like waves, like my body, like this shell here, but also the shells you see on the table here, like this building, like all the buildings within buildings, all the insides within outside. And all these patterns that are generated by these fluxes of energy running through earthly matter, they all involve these cycles, the rock, carbon, water, and nutrient cycle. So I was thinking about this metabolism when asked to reflect upon urban ecology. And metabolism is basically these flows of energy and matter within a system, whether it's your body or a city or an ecosystem, depending on photosynthesis or depending on methane. And in this search, I was really inspired by a scientist whose name is Eric Smith. And he developed a theory on the origin of life on Earth. And he has this really beautiful quote where he explains how you can think of organisms that together form an ecosystem. But he actually challenges us to flip that thinking around and think of organisms as condensing from the ecosystem, like drops of dew that follow these paths of the least resistance. So I really like this idea of individuality And I would call it precipitating, as I work with crystals that precipitate or grow from liquids. And I really like to think about it in this way, seeing these individuals appearing, but also interacting from the same background. And I think this turning around really is key when thinking of all kinds of systems, but also inequality. So when you think about socioeconomic inequality or ecosystem inequality, it's really good to be aware how we all precipitate from these common backgrounds. However, the conditions of your local background also influence the way you are shaped, or the way you grow, or the way you become. So in these crystals that are growing in a liquid grown by my colleague Marlies Bisterveld at the Self-Organizing Matter Lab, if she would change the pH in the liquid, the crystal shapes would also grow. And this also is true for all of us, of course. We all precipitate from these backgrounds where, yeah, there are so many factors that influence how you grow up, basically. And I think there's something else to this. So this way of thinking allows you to understand how individuality appears, but also why individuals are often very similar. But it also, to me, I think helps to reconnect to these shared backgrounds, to these common grounds, and also to our common responsibilities. Because I cannot feel what it's like to be a pet, and I cannot feel what it's like to be Tom or Colin or Janneke. But I can relate to what it's like to be a human being, as someone with feelings of joy and sadness and heartbreaks and loneliness, because I am part of this common background, humanity. And when I'm trying to extend my awareness into these common grounds, I can also relate to what it's like to be another organism, perhaps like a giraffe or a fish, or perhaps even a carrot. Because we share this common background of this ecosystem depending on photosynthesis. But perhaps I can also even extend my awareness even further, all the way into the geosphere. And by extending my awareness into the geosphere, perhaps I can also relate to this rock, as we are both part of the rock cycle. So I am not you, I am not this crystal, I am me, but we are all part of the complex food chains that we touch upon in the supermarkets, where I also got some different kinds of salts. We are all part of the nitrogen cycle and the eutrophication of rivers and deltas. We are all part of the climate system and ultimately the geosphere. Yet the atoms that form a blood cell in my body may one day also be part of a blood cell in Tom's body, and then perhaps it will float along some microplastic particles that are also present in our bloodstream, as you all have heard, probably was found this week or last week by scientists. And someday I will only be other, rock, ocean, or weather. Yet, while I live, my permeable houses allow me to be somewhere in between, to be both, to be me, to be us, and to be other, and act upon my responsibilities as a member of all. So, well, all of that is incorporated in my instructions for performative actions. You can find them on the link for this event. If you would like a printed card deck, you can contact me. I still have some. But the idea, for the card deck that I made was basically to make instructions for 7 days in a row that play with these elements. So the instructions, yeah, you're very much invited to look into them yourself and to also do them yourself. So as you can see, they're influenced by Cleopatra the Alchemist. She inspired me to start drawing again. But they're also kind of a practice to extend your awareness from the individual into these larger backgrounds. So going from me, you, to mineral water bodies, to the web of life, to other urban ecosystems, to other biospheres, all the way up to other geosolar systems, and then back as, of course, the snake tends to bite its tail. So, yeah, by doing these actions, you can relate to circular economy in a new way. So, yeah, I hope many of you can join. For this particular event, we thought, while discussing with Tom and Bergit, we thought it was nice if I would target scientists as a community. So I was trying to invite scientists to do my performative actions. I was a bit afraid that I would get an overwhelming response and had no time to process all the collected tears. But in the end, it seemed that scientists were a difficult community to target, because some would literally come back to me saying like, this is really lovely, but I just simply don't have the time to do this. But happily, I still could force some scientists that I know quite well to do them. So there was even one running in on her way to the lab. I haven't seen them yet, but she just, Marloes, actually the one who also grew the crystals, just passed by to show her responses. We can look at them later. Ariana, also from the Self-Organizing Matter Lab, made this too. Alice Webb, a marine biologist, created this drawing for the other urban ecosystem. Any type of drawing skills are welcome, by the way, so don't be disencouraged. She also made a walk and reflected upon the stones she encounters in Miami. And the cards are also here. Also, all the responses will be formed into a collective artwork, so you can still see them somewhere later. She also went for a little walk and looked at the birthdays of organisms she encountered. So she found a star coral of 13,254 years old. So that must have been in a stone. And the birthday is 12th of October. And as she writes, obviously, it's a Libra. Then there was also the scientist Bergit, who also made some drawings that are currently being posted from the UK to me. So these are just some pictures. Her onion, she also had some kind of tree-ish human, I think, and she would like to become the Dolomites. Well, thank you so much. Yes, please do the performative actions and send me your responses. And thank you very much.